heard they'd written this book, and it got thrown together real quick, this breakfast we were going to have. It was 8 o'clock at Eaton Park up in Cranberry. And it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm thinking, I better read this guy's book. I got to run up to Barnes & Noble and get it. But then I thought, hey, I just got an iPad. And so I downloaded this Kindle app. And I was able to download his book. And I didn't read the whole thing that night, but I read about the first 50 pages. I read that book probably in about a week. It was a page turner. It's incredible stories about what he went through with his platoon over there, and things I still can't get out of my mind. I mean, as you were talking, the things that we let our kids, really, our young men and women see. I'm thinking of a situation where I think the day you were deployed out over there was a rocket attack, and it hit a village, and children were injured. And the villagers came to the base to have their children be treated. And the villagers were saying, boys first. Boys get treated first. And there was a little girl, who was bleeding. And then one of your guys, had seen it. And you read things like that, and you realize how exceptional this country is. But we ask a lot of our veterans today. We ask a lot of you and what you went through. Whether it was in the 1940s, or the 1950s, in the 1960s, in the 1970s, in the 1980s, in the 1990s, in times when you weren't thanked, particularly in the 1970s. I had two cousins who served in Vietnam. I'll never forget, I turned 13 in 1975. And just remembering, the panic in South Vietnam. And the helicopters coming out of Saigon. And the boat people. And what the Khmer Rouge did in Cambodia. And it's just horrific. And then the way our vets were treated when they came back from that war. We can never let that happen again. And it won't happen again. Not on our watch. But I'm running for Congress. This was a kind of a decision I made a couple of years ago in 2009 when I became very concerned with the debt that our country was taking on and who was going to pay for it. When President Obama was elected in 2008, I wasn't happy because I'm a Republican, but I wasn't that worried. And I wasn't worried because, frankly, the Republicans had done such a lousy job with the budget in the 2000s that we were broke already. We had consecutive years of hundreds of billions of dollars of deficits, and then we had the big TARP bailout, another $700 billion down the hole. And then, the president had all these ambitious plans to do big government stuff. We had no money. But within 2 weeks, he put through an $800 billion stimulus package, and he doesn't care about the debt either. And our kids and grandkids, are going to be left holding the bag. And so I looked for somebody who was going to run for Congress against Jason Altmaier, and I understand Jason had a very good relationship with the vets, and I hope to emulate that. Because it was a very important issue for him, as it will be for me. I had a close race with Jason, almost won. And then the whole healthcare stuff blew up, and we were watching that. We watched chronic unemployment. And so I held my breath and watched them create a new congressional district that includes all of Beaver County, a little bit of Lawrence County, northern Allegheny County, northern Westmoreland County, and all right over to Johnstown. And so I'm running again, and I'm very. My platform is let's get the economy rolling again. You do that through limited government. You get it through reforming our tax code to make sure we have the most competitive tax code in the world. You make sure we roll back all the regulations that are shutting down our businesses, shutting down our coal mines, shutting down our power plants. And we have to repeal Obamacare because that's been a terrible drag on the job market, and it's not doing what it was supposed to do. It's turning out to be a string of empty and broken promises that we just can't afford. And so I'm running again on that 3 R's. I call it the 3 R's: to reform our tax code, to roll back the regulations and repeal Obamacare and replace it with common sense health care reform. And I think that's what's needed to get this economy rolling again. Because when you get the economy rolling again, when you get people back to work, and we have an inordinate high number of vets out of work right now, the vet unemployment rate is about 2% higher than the national rate. We have to get people back to work, because when people are working, they're paying tax, they're paying Social Security taxes. They're paying Medicare taxes. They're paying general taxes that fund a lot of our programs that are critical for us to have. So we have to grow the economy again, not at 1.2% or 1.3%, which is where we're stuck with the president's policies. We have to return to limited government and unleash the private sector, the entrepreneurs, the job creators, so we can fund the critical programs we have. Why am I, interested in vets issues? In 2002, this country went through a very significant debate. And that was whether or not we should authorize the use of force in Iraq. And this was a months-long debate. Saddam was, holding back on compliance with UN resolutions. He was threatening with weapons of mass destruction. Our intelligence thought there were weapons of mass destruction. We know that there were terrorists in Baghdad, Abu Nidal. There were terrorists there. He was funding terrorists who were blowing up pizza joints in Israel. He had a propensity to fund terrorism. And in post 9/11, we were very concerned. And this country debated, and Congress authorized the use of force. And I expressed to my representative that I think we should authorize the use of force. It's personal when we tell our representatives to put men and women in harm's way. Those who are in the service are at the tip of the spear. The whole country is the spear, but those who stand up to serve are at the tip of the spear. And when we put our men and women into combat, we have to be there for them. We have to be there for them when they're there. We have to be there when they come home. It's personal to each of us. And so when I, in my role as a private citizen, assented to the use of force, we have to take it on ourselves to make sure we're keeping the commitments we've made to the men and women in uniform. And so, we went to war. And we had incredible casualties, 4,486 in Iraq, more than 2,100 in Afghanistan, tens of thousands injured. And with the medicine advancements that we've had, being able to save folks who 30 years ago could not have been saved on the battlefield, coming home with some real difficult injuries, a lot of concussion-type injuries that have longer-lasting effects. So we have to make sure we're standing up and taking care of folks. Not every vet who comes home is going to need that, but there are those who do. We got to be there. 2007, I was diagnosed with cancer. And it was a rare form of cancer, and it required me to have major surgery. I was fortunate. It was a type of cancer that 75% of the people who get die within 5 years. I went through what was known as the mother of all surgeries. And they opened me up, and they did what they needed to do. They scrubbed me off. Heated chemo bath on the inside is what they did with me. But every time they stuck a needle into me, every time I felt a little discomfort, it was nothing compared to what you in the service have gone through. And I think of that all the time when I was in the hospital. This is nothing. I can do this. Because you guys set the standard. And so when I got out of the hospital and I got that clean bill of health, I had to give back. So I sought opportunities to serve veterans. And the first time was Marine Corps Marathon. You got the shirt on there. 2008. I can't tell you what kind of experience that was for me. Everybody who runs in that marathon runs for something. There are a lot of veterans-related causes. There's lymphoma causes. Everybody's running for something. I ran for Fisher House, which provides housing for families at veterans hospitals. And I had my Fisher House shirt on with the 300 members of the Fisher House team, and I ran. It took about 4.5 hours, just under 4.5. But I finished. And I finished, I think, because of one gentleman. Two gentlemen. About mile 5, a guy with a shirt on. It said, "I'm running for my son, Drew." So I caught up to him. I said, "Tell me about Drew, where is he?" I didn't expect the answer he gave me. He said, "Heaven." And about mile 22, or mile 23, when I was ready to give it up, I thought of Drew. And that's the kind of spirit that's at that Marine Corps Marathon. You got guys running in boots, you know, the Marines, and you got guys who have lost a limb, and they're doing it. You know, Sean mentioned this Marine who lost 3 limbs. He wants to run a marathon someday. I'd like to run it with him. But I ran another marathon here in Pittsburgh, was able to raise some money for the Veterans Leadership Program, and I'm on their board. I call it Soup to Nuts for at-risk veterans. They do housing. You know, we have a lot of homeless veterans in western Pennsylvania that you never know about. They live under bridges in groups of 15, 20 in Allegheny County. You know, you think that we have 12 homeless people in Pittsburgh because those are the ones you see on the streets of downtown Pittsburgh. No, hundreds of homeless. And so we have to be reaching out and making sure that we're catching folks who might be falling through the cracks. But that's the kind of passion I'm going to bring to veterans issues. I appreciate that we have concerns with how the health care bill is going to affect TRICARE. We've got to make sure we maintain that preferential option that we have for veterans, because it's the thank you. It's a thank you for the service. If there are any issues at the VA with delays in getting in and delays with cases taking too long, this is America. We've got to fix it. Vets get the first option because they're the ones who stood up first. That's the kind of passion I want to bring. You know, Sean talked about me rolling around in the mud. And I guess it is mud in D.C. We'll be rolling around in the mud down there. But we got to turn things around. This is there's no place in the world like this. You know, President Lincoln called it the last best hope. And President Reagan reiterated that. Sometimes I wonder if this election this year is the last best chance to save it.
Yep.
Because you know, people talk about this being the most important election. I used to say it's the most important election since 1980. I think it's the most important election probably since the 1860s. Jimmy Carter did not want to fundamentally change the nature of this country. He had bad policies, but he didn't want to fundamentally change the nature of the country, the way we see what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, with the idea that these elites in Washington can micromanage every aspect of our lives, whether it's our healthcare, our financial industry, our energy industry, you know, what our manufacturers are doing. Those solutions are out here. We have to empower the people in western Pennsylvania, not bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. So every time I'm going to be looking at issues in Washington, I'm going to be guided by a few things. Number one, the Constitution. I'm going to take an oath to uphold it. And as a member of Congress, I'm going to have responsibilities under Article 1 of that Constitution. That's going to be the guidepost. Congress's job is to spend the people's money for the common good of this country, within the confines of what the Constitution allows us. Number one, defense of our country. Number one. It's a dangerous world. That's not to say we can't find some savings at the Pentagon, because we have to look for savings. But we have to have a strong defense. Peace through strength. Do not invite provocation that's going to put our men and women at risk when we have to deploy them. If we're taking care of the country with a strong defense, we got to be taking care of our vets who serve for us. So defense and veterans are number one. Number two, we've made some commitments for those on Social Security, for those on Medicare. Those are the next priorities. Keep the commitments we've made. Obamacare does a lot of damage to Medicare. To fund this $1.7 trillion enterprise that the president put together, he raises taxes about $1 trillion. He takes $700 billion out of Medicare, and he says it's just savings. But when you look at the Medicare trustees report, we learned that 4 million people are going to lose a Medicare Advantage plan by 2018. That's not me saying it. It's not Governor Romney saying it. It's not Paul Ryan saying it. It's the Medicare trustees are saying it. Those are real cuts. And there's a big debate now whether they are cuts. And these commercials are flying back and forth. The president was challenged. Would you veto any attempt to put that back in? And the president said he would veto the attempt. Nancy Pelosi brags about taking $500 billion out of Medicare. And that's the debate we're having. We're going to save Medicare. And the first step to saving Medicare is to repeal Obamacare and repeal the Independent Payment Advisory Board they're going to put in charge. That's going to end up cutting care to seniors. I'm pro-life. I'm not going to stand by and let them do that. And so you look at where we're making funding decisions. Defense, Social Security, Medicare, infrastructure. We got to have safe roads. We got to make sure our locks and dams are working. We can't be paying for things like Solyndra, $500 million of taxpayers' dollars down the road. We can't be, funding all these experimental companies walking away with our tax dollars when they go bust. Do we want to be paying to micromanage our education policies from Washington, D.C., micromanaging our teachers? Every teacher I talk to is tired of this no child left behind. Because we got bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. deciding what should be going on in our classrooms. If you're given a choice between funding a bureaucrat who's going to micromanage our teachers in Western Pennsylvania or paying for Grandma's bypass, I'm voting for Grandma's bypass. We can't keep spending this money we don't have. Falling 42 cents of every dollar, it's wrong. But that's a little bit about me. By trade, just so you know, a little bit, I live right down the river. I live in Swickley. Raising my 6 kids there, ages 5 to 22. The oldest has actually already moved out, flew the nest. Been married to my wife Elsie for 23 years. I'm an attorney by trade, Notre Dame law grad. Contrary to what some folks might think, I don't work on Wall Street. I work on Stanley Street. I negotiate software licenses, negotiate purchase agreements. And when you negotiate in the private sector, you understand that you have to compromise along the way. Not on your core principles, but on areas where you can get together. Because when your client sends you into a negotiating session, they'll tell you, you better have those 3 things in that contract. And when you understand the other attorney comes in, they say, you better have those 3 things in that contract. You gotta work it out. And in the private sector, we work it out. Because in the private sector, we want to get out of there and start to earn some revenue so we can grow businesses and add jobs and get the job done. And that's the kind of work ethic I'm going to bring to Washington. Every time I'm in front of a group of voters, it's a job interview. So I told you a little bit about me, and I invite questions because you, as the future employer, you're going to hire somebody on November 6th, and that person becomes your employee in January. This is your opportunity to kick the tires on me, and I invite questions. Hey, Jerry.
This thing that's going to happen, they're calling the sequester thing. Yeah. It's going to cut the military. I mean, with the new Congress, if the Republicans get control, are we going to be able to turn that ship around, or?
Yeah, you cannot have indiscriminate cuts in the defense budget. And this was an abdication of responsibility, frankly, this whole setup with the Budget Control Act, where they kind of kicked it off to a super committee. Congress did not do its work, which they seem chronically unable to do. And they had half of the cuts coming out of 25% of the budget. The 25% of the budget is the defense budget. So half the cuts coming out when we have men and women in theater. I'm not saying you can't find savings at the Pentagon, but to just have this fell swoop, cutting $55 billion out of it come January 2nd, we shouldn't be doing that. And so the House actually passed a bill earlier this year to reprioritize those sequester savings to make sure that the defense budget wasn't going to get inordinately hit. The guy I'm running against voted against that. So he said, hey, it's okay, let it go through. No, we're going to have some work to do in January.
What happened with the endorsement of the Tribune Review? Did they see the letter?
You'll have to talk to Tribune Review about that one.
You know, June what?
Yes, sir.
If I understand the setup now that we're facing with this fiscal cliff that's coming in January, Obama is at odds with Congress. Congress will not agree to impose more taxes on the higher earners, and Obama says that he's just going to go ahead and let these tax hikes go into effect. If that's true, and you're caught in a position like that and you're in Congress, how would you vote for something like that?
Well, we're going to have a retroactive tax cut, I'm afraid, going back to January 1st. Understand, the taxes that are going to go up are going to hit 894,000 small businesses, including 80% of the manufacturers here in Pennsylvania. Why is that? Well, because there's something called sub-S corporations. They're small businesses, and the owners are taxed at individual rates. Right now, the top tax rate for corporations and the top tax rate for individuals is 35%. And so these people who own a subchapter S, maybe they have a small manufacturing company, and they're a sub-S corporation, they're going to get taxed at 35%. But the president wants to raise the taxes on those companies up to 39 to 40, it's at 41% effective rate. So you're going to be this strange situation where you have a small business manufacturer getting taxed at a 41% rate when you have these big conglomerate corporations getting taxed at a 35% rate. Is that fair? No, it's not fair. And the president himself said never raise taxes in a slow economy. And he's so eager to raise taxes so that they can feed his spending binge. And so you never raise taxes when the economy is sputtering like this. And so, if they don't work it out, we may have to have a retroactive tax increase when you have a President Romney and a new Republican Senate and a stronger Republican House.
I'm concerned about the military vote. Every 4 years, we go through the same thing every 4 years. What can we do about that?
Well, we got to have a robust enforcement of the rights of service members to vote. We got to make sure if there are issues, either we look at, what can we be doing through DOD, through the Defense Department, to make sure veterans are exercising their right to vote. And if there are issues going on at county levels or state levels where ballots aren't getting out or getting processed, we got to be taking a hard look at that. And absolutely,
What do we do about this election? Romney, I guess, has a lawsuit.
I'm not following. I haven't heard that yet, Bob. So,
Yeah,
I think we got to make sure if you hear a problem, that people are, alerted so that litigation can take place. So we can protect. We don't want to disenfranchise our service members.
Sure, just let me add, and their dependents if they're out away from where they're from.
Yeah.
Because that is a problem that I'm very much aware of
Right.
from my dependents.
Right.
Keith, 60 Minutes had a story, I think this was last Sunday, of the Veterans Courts. Do you know anything about them?
Well, we have a veterans court here in Allegheny County.
Okay, is that county, state? or
Yes,
federal?
it's a county police court.
Okay.
I think it's Judge McCarthy downtown in Pittsburgh anyway. Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas. And actually, I think there was a model up in Buffalo that they learned from. And this was a way to kind of like an early intervention for some vets who are struggling with some issues. And if we can, get them at an early stage and get them into the supportive services available through VA or other social service agencies, it's a way to head off some future problems.
Is VLP involved in that at all?
VLP has been encouraging the development of that, yeah. And by the way, VLP, a week from tonight, Wednesday, a week from, Carnegie Music Hall down in Oakland is their annual tribute to veterans. It's a very moving evening. If anybody wants to get down there, VLP, WPAVLP.org is where you get information on it.
Where's it gonna be?
What's that?
Where's it gonna be?
It's not at the Carnegie Museum.
Oh,
Carnegie Music Hall, right?
Oh,
Right
next
at
to
the
the Carnegie
museum.
Museum. What gets me is they always run the scroll of the folks we've lost, the men and women that we've lost, and it's moving. It's,
It really is, yeah.
yeah.
It's close to 1,000 people were there 2
Yeah.
years ago.
Yes, sir.
What do you think Governor Corbett should do as far as the healthcare exchange?
Well, I think we have to wait till January to see if, what we're gonna be doing with the healthcare bill. We need healthcare reform, and, you know, there are a lot of issues in play right now. So my hope is that we have a new president, my hope is that we have a new Senate, and that we can get about the work of real healthcare reform. You know, the president's bill, he listed broken and empty promises. He said it was gonna provide universal coverage. Well, there's still gonna be 30 million people uninsured in 10 years. He said it wasn't gonna increase premiums. He said it was gonna reduce premiums by $2,500 per family per year. Not true. He said it wasn't a tax. Well, the Supreme Court exposed that one. Not true. He said if you like your health care plan, you can keep it. Not true.
oh,
A lot of companies are going to be dropping health coverage because it'll be cheaper for them to put their employees into the exchanges and just pay the $2,000 fine instead of paying a $12,000 or $13,000 or $14,000 for the health insurance for the employees. And even if a company wants to take care of their employees and is doing the right thing, but their competitor across the street decides, you know what, they're going to go the exchange route, and they're going to all of a sudden save $12,000 per employee, and they're going to be able to, you know, undercut the prices of the guy who's trying to do the right thing. All these, you know, incentives. In Obamacare, believe it or not, Obamacare has resulted in outsourcing. How did that happen? Well, because the masterminds in Washington, you know, said, oh, 20% of your premiums or 20% of the revenues, you know, no more than 20% on administrative services, administrative costs. So these folks who run the insurance companies say, oh, well, then we'll just outsource the call center so they can stay within that 20%. Yeah, it's a big government, you know, law of unintended consequences. Somebody has a great idea, like banning our light bulbs and making us use the curly light bulbs. And what happens? We closed the last American factory that made the traditional light bulbs. Lost 200 jobs from that factory, and guess what? Now we import everything from China. You know, we make ourselves uncompetitive. You know, we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. We overregulate. Does anybody here think China's going to stop using coal? Yes, sir.
I would mention, Keith, that they're working on a veterans court here in Beaver County.
Sorry?
They are working on one of the
A veterans
veterans
court?
court
Good.
for Beaver County. It's in the works, yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming here. If you liked what I had to say,
yes, I did.
I'd ask you for your vote in November. Each of you have your own circle of influence. You go to a church, a club. Yes, sir.
Here's something that's concerning me.
Yes, sir.
I have been receiving a lot of mail stating that they're trying to get the chaplains out of the military. If the day ever came that they ask me, or tell me rather, you cannot end your prayers in Jesus' name.
Sorry.
I'm a chaplain volunteer down at the medical center and a chaplain out at the Beaver Valley Rehab. If the day ever came that they told me, and I have to request a patient, do you mind if I pray for you? If the day came when they told me I could not end my prayers in Jesus' name, my ministry is done. Because the Bible states no man can go unto the Father except through Jesus Christ. And I rely on the Holy Spirit. In fact, I prayed for a woman about a year or so ago. And the prayer I gave was not my prayer. I could not take credit for that. But the son told me, he said, when did you meet my mother? Because the way you prayed, like you knew my mother. I said, I can't take credit for that.
I'm going to fight for the First Amendment. The First Amendment provides for the free exercise of religion. You know, and you know, there is, there's a cemetery out in is it Nevada, where there's a monument across that nobody can even see it, but they're trying to take it down. It's a free exercise issue. It's a free speech issue. You know, you cannot just clamp down and say you cannot speak. You know, they don't have the authority under our Constitution to abridge that. And so, yeah, we got to protect our constitutional rights to the free exercise of religion and freedom of speech. But thank you for saying that. Again, you have your circles of influence. You're involved in your churches, in your clubs, your neighborhoods. This is going to be a close election. We need all hands on deck for this. We've got to turn the country around. You know, with the right prescriptions, the right remedies to get this economy rolling again, so we can get the revenues we need to pay for the critical social service programs we have. So I thank you so much, and thank you for your service, and God bless everybody.